Danny is in Dallas, Texas. Danny, you're on the Larry Otis Show. Thank you so much for calling. I appreciate it.
Hey, how you doing? Well, when I first picked up the show, I have to say I appreciate the way you covered the part about the police brutality, because there are two sides of it. Unfortunately, there are those who accuse the officers when they are definitely not in the wrong. One of them in particular is even in McKinney, Texas. The city councilman was doing 20 miles over the speed limit, and sure enough, the first thing he did was threaten the officers with their jobs and integrity because he was a council member.
Mm-hmm.
And come to find out, when they looked at the video, the officers did absolutely nothing wrong. And of course, then he recanted and made an apology. But by then, the information was already out, and the officers and the officers' families were being threatened
right
by the people within the area. And that's just really unfortunate. And like in the Milwaukee incident, when people are parked wrongly, doesn't matter who they are, in front of a Walgreens or a drugstore like that, the officer pulls up, their adrenaline automatically goes up.
Mm-hmm.
Think about it. Every time they go into a situation or even walk into a restaurant these days with people that have just up and cold-bloodedly killed policemen on the street or in a business, it's like walking into a room full of rattlesnakes.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know if that snake's going to bite you or not, but they're there.
Right.
So you have to be, they're on their guard, and of course, they're constantly tensed up, then they have to cool down, then they're tensed up, then they have to cool down, and
mm-hmm.
it's tough for them to control. And so you have to, when last time I got pulled over, and he asked me to reach into my glove box and pull up my insurance, I started to reach across there, but then I stopped and I looked back at him to make sure that he was okay with the way that I was doing it,
mm-hmm.
because I didn't want the officer to feel uncomfortable.
Well, absolutely, Danny. Danny, thank you very much for calling, and that is why I'm such a strong proponent of body cams. They're far more beneficial, by the way, for officers than they are for civilians. I've told you about the city of Rialto here in California, and the officers were reluctant. They were mandated to wear the body cams, and some of the officers didn't want to. But it turned out that the officer complaints fell dramatically, and officer use of force fell dramatically. Now, the civilians knew that they were being taped, and therefore they weren't lying on officers, and they weren't testing officers, and as a result, the officers didn't have to use the kind of force that they had to use before. So it turned out that the behavior of the civilians changed. Cops just did what they were trained to do. Civilians, however, stopped lying, because you can be prosecuted for lying on an officer. Now, regarding the encounter with the basketball player in Milwaukee, based on what I've seen, it seemed to me that the officers overreacted. Although, again, as Danny pointed out, whenever you walk up on somebody like that, you're going to be in a tense situation. He told the officers he had stuff in his pockets, and apparently he wanted them to be aware of that so that they didn't think he was moving for a firearm. And then they jumped on him, and then they tased him. Again, it seemed to be excessive to me, and the police have now admitted that it was excessive and apologized to the man. On the other hand, 4 teens have been arrested in connection with killing a Baltimore County officer. The 4 teens happen to be black. The female officer, happened to be white. And it turns out that a black person, a cop, is 18 times more likely to be killed than an unarmed black man to be killed by a cop. I repeat, a police officer is 18 times more likely to be murdered by a black man than a black man unarmed murdered by a cop. Here's what happened.
Who are charged are also charged as adults. The teenagers, the new suspects, are 15, 16, and 17 years old. They join as defendants Donta Harris in the killing Monday of Baltimore County police officer Amy Caprio. Harris allegedly drove his vehicle over the officer, causing fatal injuries. It happened after she fired a shot. This all happened as she was approaching the vehicle during a burglary stop, trying to get information. At the time, the state's attorney, Scott Schellenberger, said yesterday, Scott Schellenberger, the state's attorney, said yesterday that he believed the additional 3 who were in the house allegedly committing the burglary when the fatal injury to the officer occurred doesn't matter, according to Scott Schellenberger. He said yesterday he believes the state does have a theory that they can prosecute all 4 of these teenagers now with murder. The new charges include murder against the new suspects, the three, as well as burglary. They will have a bail review here at the district court in Towson in about an hour. Two of them are from East Baltimore. A third is from Southeast Baltimore. According to charging documents, the three new suspects were identified by Donta Harris.
According to Heather McDonald, quote, a police officer is 18 times more likely to be killed by a black male than an unarmed black male is to be killed by a police officer. Black males have made up 42% of all cop killers over the past decade, though they are only 6% of the population, end of quote. We come back. Mike in Sacramento says, I was homeless. It's not all from drugs and alcohol. Mike, please don't leave town.